What's up everyone and welcome back to the channel that takes you through the fog with our Countdown to HHN series, where for the whole month of August, we give you guys our fun and unique videos to build your hype up for this year's HHN 32.
In today's video, we'll be giving you our list of our most anticipated houses and scare zones that will be featured at this year's event. So with that said, let's dive into this episode of Countdown to HHN.
Halloween Horror Nights will be featuring 10 haunted houses as well as 5 sinister scare zones for this year's 32nd annual running at Universal Orlando. And as tradition, every single year, we go ahead and cover our most anticipated list leading into this year's event. So the way we're going to start off with is the 5 scare zones, going from our least anticipated to the most anticipated. Then we'll head over to the houses. So let's dive into number 5 with our scare zones.
Starting off with our number 5 scare zone, we have Shipyard 32 Horrors Unhinged. So this scare zone takes place in San Francisco in the 1940s, where these crates with Dr. Oddfellow's symbol on them have broken open and his oddities have escaped. So I think the reason why this is low on our list, it's the last place on our list, is simply because of the location. We don't love the San Francisco scare zone historically.
Yeah, and don't get this wrong, even though it's number 5 on our list, doesn't mean that we're not excited for it. The San Francisco location in recent years hasn't really been the strongest scare zone spot for us, so we just haven't been so excited for it. And right now the way it is, it's based on the construction progress that we're seeing currently. It's just a bunch of shipping crates at the moment. There are some cool things and touches that we do see here throughout the scare zone, and we have done some construction update videos throughout the parks, and we'll be doing some more leading up to the event. But this is the one, out of the rest of them, that we have lower on our list. It's a hard list to compete. They're all originals, and when it comes to scare zones, really, it's hard to expect early on what you're gonna see until you actually get there. So that's why we have Shipyard 32 at the bottom currently, but that doesn't mean it's not gonna be good.
Moving into our number 4 place, which is going to be Jungle of Doom Expedition Horror.
The setting is a 1920s jungle where Dr. Oddfellow was performing some crazy experiments over some of the creatures found within this jungle. Now, when we did some of our walkthroughs for the construction update, we noticed there are some giant spiders in the scare zone, which is kind of why it's down to number 4 for us. We're not really a fan of bugs, and this seems to be having some bugs featured in the scare zone. But other than that, it's starting to look really good. It's coming together. It's just in Central Park, which is a good location, but it's one of the smaller scare zones at the park.
Yes, and if we're being completely honest, the top 4 spots for our scare zones are neck and neck. They're very, very close. We're very excited for all of them. We have to put them in some spot. So Jungle of Doom is going towards the end, just because Central Park is a smaller area and we don't like spiders.
So that is our number 4 scare zone, which is Jungle of Doom. But now we need to head over to our number 3 scare zone, which is gonna be In the Streets of Hollywood, Dark Zodiac.
So the story of this zone is essentially Dr. Oddfellow is using the power of the Zodiac to harness it and be able to live forever. So we're gonna see different creatures that are the Zodiac signs, but kind of twisted, which I'm really excited for. I think it's gonna be really cool to see all the different Zodiac signs, but in these dark, twisted ways.
Yeah, I'm really hoping that the scare actors, the creatures that we're actually seeing in this zone, have some extreme features to them. That's what I think would make this scare zone the best for this year, is depending on the costumes for the zone. Now, this one's not really based out of, but we had one in Singapore before, which was off the Dark Zodiacs. And when we saw this, when this was speculated earlier on in the year, we were extremely excited for this because we were man, that looks good. It's just the question is it gonna be the same translated over here in Orlando as well? That's my only thing that I'm a little worried about it, but nonetheless, there's a lot that they can do with it. It's kind of like an anthology style setup where you have the different Zodiacs that you can kind of go off of. So it's up there in the top, round 3 for us, just because I'm a little cautious on it, but if they can nail the looks of the creatures and stuff that we're gonna see, I think it could pull off to be one of the best scare zones for the year.
So moving on to our number 2 scare zone is going to be Dr. Oddfellow's collection of horror. And this is going to be the scare zone right at the entrance of the park. And essentially Dr. Oddfellow is just like welcoming us in. He's trying to get us all to join him so that he can use us to then essentially live forever. So the scare zone will also feature a lot of the characters from the other scare zones within the park this year. And honestly, I'm not the biggest fan of that usage of like the other characters in like this main scare zone, but I am very excited because of the catwalk that they have on the structure in the front, and also the caravan that they have looks really, really cool.
This is number 2 on our list, and the reason why, I think the sole reason, is because of that catwalk that they have right at the front gates of the park. We haven't really seen something of that scale in recent years at Horror Nights when it comes to the front of the park, and this is supposed to be a full-blown scare zone there. So just seeing that has got me excited for it that much, and then the fact that it is Dr. Oddfellow, he's going to be featured throughout, this event basically, in all the scare zones, but this is his scare zone. And, we're huge on the lore of Horror Nights and getting to see his backstory and how he plays a whole part of it all. It's going to be nice to kind of actually physically see him and what he's doing and welcoming people with that catwalk. And then the little caravan is like interesting. Like, I like the details on it and stuff, but I want to see exactly what we're going to have in the scare zone. And I really hope there's a lot of energy to it and all that stuff. So it's a good spot for number 2 for us, especially because of that catwalk. But that's it. Number 2, Dr. Oddfellow's collection of horror.
So now we are moving into our number 1 spot for the scare zones, and I think this comes as no surprise to anybody who has watched this channel for some time, but it is Vamp 69 Summer of Blood. And not only do we love the Vamp scare zones, but we love the Vamp scare zones when they are in New York, which we are getting this year.
New York has a very unfair advantage amongst the other scare zones in the park, and it's because of size. This is the largest scare zone that you can get at Horror Nights. Hollywood is a close second, but New York is by far the largest one that we have. So it's always like, no matter what's gonna go there, it's gonna be favorable on our side, but then they're putting vamps there, and we're big fans of vampires and all that stuff. And I'm hoping we get legitimate music from 69 and earlier, because this is gonna be a fun little area. I mean, it really is. It's like a concert kind of gone wrong kind of vibe and stuff. And we're big fans of it. And just seeing the construction updates on it, they have a large stage in New York, and it's the whole street of New York. So I mean, constantly, like, every single year I tell people, like, where's the best place to be when it comes to being at the event at Horror Nights, and that's in the streets of New York, because there's so much surrounding you when it comes to the scare zone.
So there were our scare zones from our least anticipated up to our most anticipated, but now we are moving on to the main event, which is the houses. We will be doing that same order, going from number 10 all the way up to number 1.
So starting out that list at the number 10 spot is going to be The Exorcist Believer. This film is done by Blumhouse and is going to be released in mid-October, specifically October 13th, which we are getting a Friday the 13th date, which is super cool. But it's number 10 on our list, and I think the main reason why is because it's technically supposed to be us going through a living trailer of this property. It's not like we've seen the movie, we really don't know what to expect except for what we've already seen in the trailer, which that's what the house is going to be.
Yeah, and neither of us have experienced the original Exorcist house, so I think that we would have been more anticipating the original Exorcist. We know that, other fans have gone through that house before, so they might not care to see that again, but I would much rather see the original Exorcist, because we don't know what to expect from this movie since it isn't coming out until later this year. And honestly, we kind of forgot about it when we were making our list. So if that tells you anything, it tells you that we're not really anticipating it.
I want to make a quick note too, real quick. All the houses on the list, it is pretty close. Again, it's the same with the scare zones. There's not really one that really sets itself apart. There is obviously a couple that are more higher up than the rest, but they're all that close, just like the scare zone. So it's going to be a hard, tight list for us to get through as well.
Heading into our number 9 spot on the list, this is also going to be our first original house on the list, and this is The Darkest Deal. So the premise of this house is essentially a blues musician who sells his soul to the devil to get fame. And because this is an original house, we just don't know a lot about it, and we don't know like what to expect or what it's going to look like. We also are not like the biggest like blues or jazz fans, so that's why it's on the bottom of the list, but it could be amazing. We just don't know.
When it comes to originals, it's really hard to say whether this house is going to be incredible or not so well received with the fans, just because we don't know what to expect. It's just like Stephanie said, it's an original. You're not sure what you're getting yourself into, but that doesn't mean it's not going to be great, and it doesn't mean it's not going to be bad. We've had originals that we've experienced in past years that have been the greatest houses we've ever been through, and some that are just kind of in the bottom. Like Steph said, blues, jazz, New Orleans style, that's not really our vibe and our taste. So we're not so crazy about this house. However, though, it could be a sleeper one because we are wondering what the music's really gonna be like in it and exactly what the whole like vibe and the premise and what we're gonna see as being like the evil source and all that stuff in this house. So that's number 9, Darkest Deals. Not so much excited for it, but doesn't mean it's not gonna be a great house at this year's event.
So that was number 9 on our list, but number 8 is going to be another original, which is Blood Moon Dark Offerings.
The setting of this one is kind of unique with it being a colonial area time period with a cult-like group that is basically going after people who are not celebrating the blood moon. Now, that's really all I know about this house. I know there is a podcast out there. I haven't seen it, but Stephanie has heard this podcast.
I did listen to it and it sounds cool, but it does kind of sound like your generic colonial era, like witches, cults, things like that. So I think it could be really cool. It has a lot of potential. We could get like the blood moon like off in the distance, which would be really cool. But I just am not like super excited for this one.
Yeah, this is one of those houses that I'm like, I have to see it to really know what my rating is gonna be, which we will be doing ratings like that when the season actually gets here and stuff. But as far as like anticipated, that's all we really have, to be honest, going forward.
And going back to IPs, the next house on our list in the number 7 spot is going to be Chucky Ultimate Kill Count. So the premise of this house is essentially that Chucky was going to get his own house, and then he came in and realized that they weren't actually killing people, and he got a little upset. So then he took over and started actually killing people in the haunted house. So it's very meta.
Yeah, Chucky. Not a big fan of Chucky. But the more that this was discussed and stuff, the more that I found myself a little more intrigued to see what this is going to be. This is kind of based off of like the Chucky TV series that they had over on the Sci-Fi Today and all that, but it just, we've never seen it, so we don't know what to expect. We've been told so many times to actually go watch the show, and we just haven't, just because we're not Chucky fans. But the more we hear about it, the more I get excited to see what this could be.
And I think what I'm most excited about in this house is, and we weren't excited for Chucky to begin with, but the more I'm hearing about it, the more I'm getting excited for like seeing the attendance and the workers essentially being killed and like guests being killed in the house, because it is very like meta. So I am excited about that. But that is going to be Chucky in our number 7 spot.
And continuing our list with the number 6 spot and another original that we have for this year's event, which is Yeti Campground Kills. This house is going to be set into the 1950s, where of course you're going to be in a campground little area, and of course there's a whole bunch of Yetis on the loose coming after you. The one thing that I love about this, besides the era of the 1950s, I feel like this is gonna be a really campy house, you know, no pun intended. It is gonna be in a campground and all that, but there's like a mission when it comes to this house, because you have to get to the ranger station when you're going through this house. So you might actually see like the ranger station off in the distance while you're traversing through the woods.
Yeah, and they've been using the Yetis for the past few years now. It was in Slaughter Cinema, and then they did Yeti Terror of the Yukon, and they're just continuing to go with this whole Yeti thing. And I think the fans love it because they love the Yetis. They're giant, so they're really scary.
Yeah.
And it's cool to just get all these different iterations of the Yetis.
Yeah, so you're basically gonna get giant, Bigfoot, Yeti-like creatures and stuff. And just like Steph's saying, it's like these giant creatures. I mean, nothing's more terrifying than giant creatures overshadowing you as you're walking through the woods. I'm excited for this house. I'm just worried because I really want it to have that woods-like feeling. Like, I want giant trees involved in this and stuff. It is supposedly speculated to be in a soundstage. And if it is, I think they have a potential to do that. I'm not too sure exactly how they're gonna pull that off.
So now we are heading into our top 5 with our number 5 spot, which is Dueling Dragons, Choose Thy Fate. If you are a fan of Universal and you have been to Universal for years, you will know that Dueling Dragons was a roller coaster back in the day. And they're essentially bringing that back for a haunted house, which is really interesting. But the premise of the house is that there were 2 warlocks that end up getting turned into dragons, and now we're being put in the middle of their battle.
Now, I was a huge fan of Dueling Dragons as a roller coaster. I loved it when it was at Islands of Adventure, and when this was being talked to come to Horror Nights, I was like, no, there's no way they would do this. And lo and behold, here we are. We're actually getting a ride, an extinct ride that we've had at the park in years past, show up as a haunted house at Horror Nights. It's a very weird combination. Like, how are you gonna make a roller coaster into a house? So I'm intrigued to see it. That's why it's not up there. But I mean, it's Dueling Dragons. I love Dueling Dragons, and to see it come to a haunted house could be really fun, especially with the fact that they have multiple endings to this house. There's different paths that you could pick.
That's what I'm most excited for, is that there are going to be multiple endings, and I think that's why it is a little bit higher on my list. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of like the warlocks and the dragons and all of that stuff, but the fact that there are multiple endings, and because we're locals, we go through the houses so many times, it'll be really cool to be able to experience multiple endings. So that is number 5, Dueling Dragons, Choose Thy Fate.
Now headed into the 4th spot that we have on our most anticipated list, and the last original that we have left, which is Dr. Oddfellow's Twisted Origins.
So the story for this house is Dr. Oddfellow. He's kind of like our icon for this year. It seems like he's in all of the scare zones. He has his own house, but essentially we're going through his carnival. And of course there's gonna be some like twisted things in there, some weird things, of course. And I think we will also get a cameo from Jack the Clown. So we're really excited for this one because it's that HHN lore.
Yeah, that's the reason why this house is so high up on the list, because it is strong with HHN lore. And yeah, it's got Dr. Oddfellow. I mean, he's the main guy for this year and stuff, but the fact that him and Jack have a connection when it comes to HHN lore in the past and stuff, we could be seeing, you know, that story build even more, and everybody loves Jack. I mean, well, a majority of people do, at least. You know, he's one of the main icons of Horror Nights, so seeing like a backstory of him and his fellow, you know, ringmaster of Oddfellow in his house could be really neat. Now, as the house in premise, like Steph and I, we don't really care for clowns. You know, we really don't care, but this is not like a clown house. You know, this is like a dark carnival type of thing, which is why it's a little more higher up on the list to see some of his creations and stuff like that.
Yeah, and Discovery Universal did do a podcast all about Dr. Oddfellow, and I believe in one of the sections of the podcast, they talk about essentially this carnival and going through this carnival, and the descriptions of it sound really, really cool, really dark. So I'm really excited to experience this one.
Yeah, so Dr. Oddfellow's little Twisted Origins being number 4 on the list, but that means we have to head into our top 3 that is left, which are the final IPs coming up with The Last of Us.
This is probably one of the most anticipated houses for this year because it is based off of The Last of Us, the video game, which is a huge hit as far as video games go. This is based off of the video game version and not the HBO TV series, but we're really excited for it because we did watch the HBO TV series and we really liked it. We have not played the video game though, so that's why it's not like number 1 on our list.
Yeah, but from what we've heard, this is solely based on the Pittsburgh area of the game. And from the concepts and the designs of the clickers and stuff, this could be a really neat house. We're talking about different things from like, you know, you have to survive from people that live in Pittsburgh and stuff like that, as well as the clickers. The clickers have such a unique design to them and sound and stuff. This could be one of the more terrifying like zombie like haunted houses that we've ever had at Horror Nights.
And they even mentioned in the Discovery Universal podcast that they're not only going to have clickers, but they're also going to have, I think, what they call stalkers and the bloaters. So we'll get some really, really cool creatures in this house.
Now moving from the number 3 spot over to number 2, we have another very highly anticipated IP when it comes to this year's event, and that is gonna be Stranger Things Season 4.
So if you have seen Stranger Things Season 4, that is essentially what we are getting for this house. But what I'm really excited for in this house is Stranger Things Season 4 was a little bit darker, had a little bit more horror themes than in previous seasons. So it'll be really cool to see that, as well as the main villain, Vecna, in this house.
Yeah, when we watched Stranger Things Season 4 last year when it first came out and aired to the public and all, it was a big deal, and it was a really well done season in general. It was dark. There's a lot more darker scenes to this than I was expecting from a Stranger Things show, and Vecna was a good antagonist for the show, and something that they said that we will be seeing in this house. You guys know us, we love Stranger Things, we love that 80s vibe and stuff, and to see it in a house again coming to Halloween Horror Nights, we've had it in years past, we're getting it again this year, so we are of course excited. It is number 2 on our list, but it comes with a little bit of caution, which is why it's at number 2, because of what the 2019 house was like for us in the past.
Yeah, and that house was not our favorite house. We were really anticipating that house, and then it just didn't fully live up to the hype. So we are a little cautious with this house, but I have really high hopes that it will be a really, really good house.
Now, with Stranger Things being number 2 on the list, that only leaves one more house, Universal Classic Monsters Unmasked, taking the number 1 spot for our anticipated list. This house is our number 1 respectively because we are big fans of the classic monsters. If you guys know us, we have artwork obviously in our studio for the classic monsters, and the storyline that they're going with these monsters we love. This more like modern animalistic kind of material that they're doing for the monsters. And we have different monsters featured this year. We got Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, we have the Hunchback of Notre Dame, we have the Invisible Man, and the Phantom of the Opera.
And we're really excited for this house because it is a classic monsters house. We know in years past they do a really amazing job with these houses. They are kind of like IPs, but also originals because they have their own story that the creative team gets to come up with, and that really helps to not limit them. They can do whatever they want with it, and we get these really amazing, beautiful stories, but we also have those characters that we know and love.
And I think the reason why Monsters has consistently been at the top of our list for years past is because every single Monsters house we've had since 2019 with the classic monsters then coming out here in Orlando is energy. Every single time we've gone to a Monsters house in the past, the energy is always there, it's always high. The last year's Legends Collide house had the best energy out of all the houses we had. So I'm really hoping that going into this year with the characters that are featured, we're gonna see some high, intense, energetic scenes when it comes to the monsters, because that's how Universal's portraying them in a sense, where they're just that animalistic vibe and they have all that energy. And we're gonna be in Paris. So we have some beautiful scenery possibly that we're gonna get into. And of course the catacombs are gonna be a main feature, which is obviously not beautiful, but scary to be seen.
So there we go, that wraps up our most anticipated both Scarezones and houses list for HHN 32.
Now, if you guys enjoyed today's video, be sure to leave it a thumbs up and let us know in the comments down below what your most anticipated list. Is it somewhat similar to what we featured here in today's video with the houses or the Scarezones, or is it something completely different? And also, are you guys okay with us having classic monsters as number 1 and not like Stranger Things or The Last of Us?
And one other quick note, we will be hosting a live stream going deeper into our most anticipated list and talking with all of you about the houses and Scarezones that you're most looking forward to. So make sure you mark your calendars because you're not gonna wanna miss that one.
So that's gonna be it for us in today's video. We hope you guys enjoyed it, and until the next one, we look forward to seeing you guys there. And like always, we'll catch you guys in the fog. Peace out, everybody.
Bye.